Pride and Prejudice, Jane Austen, 1813. Chapter 1. It is a truth universally acknowledged that a single man in possession of a great fortune must be in want of a wife. However little known the feelings or views of such a man may be on his first entering a neighborhood, this truth is so well fixed in the minds of the surrounding families that he is considered as the rightful property of someone or other of their daughters. Such was the case when news reached the household of Mr. and Mrs. Bennet that a wealthy young gentleman had taken possession of Netherfield Park. Mrs. Bennet, whose chief concern in life was the advantageous marriage of her 5 daughters, was immediately consumed with excitement. "My dear Mr. Bennet," she cried one morning, "have you heard that Netherfield Park is let at last?" Mr. Bennet replied that he had not. "But it is," returned she, "for Mrs. Long has just been here, and she told me all about it." Mr. Bennet made no answer. "Do you not want to know who has taken it?" cried his wife impatiently. "You want to tell me, and I have no objection to hearing it." This was invitation enough. "Why, my dear, you must know Mrs. Long says that Netherfield is taken by a young man of large fortune from the north of England. He came down on Monday in a chaise and 4 to see the place, and was so much delighted with it that he agreed with Mr. Morris immediately. He is to take possession before Michaelmas, and some of his servants are to be in the house by the end of next week." "What is his name?" "Bingley." "Is he married or single?" "Oh, single, my dear, to be sure. A single man of large fortune, 4,000 or 5,000 a year. What a fine thing for our girls." "How so? How can it affect them?" "My dear Mr. Bennet," replied his wife, "how can you be so tiresome? You must know that I am thinking of his marrying one of them." "Is that his design in settling here?" "Design? Nonsense! How can you talk so? But it is very likely that he may fall in love with one of them, and therefore you must visit him as soon as he comes." "I see no occasion for that. You and the girls may go, or you may send them by themselves." Mrs. Bennet was offended. "You take delight in vexing me. You have no compassion on my poor nerves." "You mistake me, my dear. I have a high respect for your nerves." "They are my old friends. I have heard you mention them with consideration these 20 years at least." Mrs. Bennet was not amused. She insisted that Mr. Bennet must call on Mr. Bingley, for it would be improper for the young ladies to visit him without an introduction. Mr. Bennet, however, enjoyed teasing his wife and gave her no satisfaction for several days. At last, when Mrs. Bennet had nearly exhausted her patience, he calmly assured her that he had already visited Mr. Bingley. The joy of Mrs. Bennet was beyond expression. She declared she was perfectly delighted and immediately began planning gowns, dances, and introductions. Thus, with a single visit and a great deal of expectation, the lives of the Bennet family were quietly set upon a course that would change them forever. Chapter 2. Mr. Bennet was among the earliest of those who waited on Mr. Bingley. He had always intended to visit him, though to the last he assured his wife that he should not go. The result of his visit was soon made known, for he returned home with a quiet smile and revealed that Mr. Bingley was young, agreeable, and exceedingly handsome. Mrs. Bennet was transported with delight. Her daughters were eager to hear every detail. Jane, the eldest, listened with gentle interest, hoping well of everyone. Elizabeth, lively and quick-witted, observed her father's expressions with amusement. Mr. Bennet described Mr. Bingley as good-humored, lively, and unassuming. He also mentioned that Mr. Bingley intended to attend the next public ball in the neighborhood. At this news, Mrs. Bennet was overcome with happiness. The ball would be the perfect opportunity for her daughters to make an impression. Kitty and Lydia, the two youngest, were already imagining dresses and partners. Mary, more serious and reflective, thought of music and accomplishments. Jane considered only the pleasure of meeting new acquaintances. Elizabeth, however, was curious but cautious, amused by the eagerness of her mother and younger sisters. Mrs. Bennet immediately began calculating which daughter might attract Mr. Bingley's notice. She declared Jane's beauty to be unmatched and spoke confidently of her success. Mr. Bennet, meanwhile, observed the scene with quiet irony, well aware of the follies and affections that governed his household. Thus, anticipation grew within the Bennet family, as the approaching ball promised to introduce not only new acquaintances, but new feelings, misunderstandings, and hopes that none of them yet understood. Chapter 3. The long-anticipated ball at Meryton arrived, and with it came great excitement throughout the neighborhood. Mr. Bingley attended with his sisters, his brother-in-law Mr. Hurst, and a friend whose presence would soon command particular attention, Mr. Darcy. Mr. Bingley was immediately liked. He was cheerful, open, and eager to dance. He spoke readily with strangers and showed pleasure in the company around him. Mr. Darcy, however, stood in sharp contrast. Though tall, handsome, and of noble appearance, his reserved manner and proud silence quickly cooled the admiration his looks had inspired. Before the evening ended, he had earned a reputation for arrogance. He danced only once, spoke little, and appeared to consider himself far above the company. Elizabeth Bennet overheard him decline a dance with her, remarking that she was tolerable, but not handsome enough to tempt him. Rather than feeling wounded, Elizabeth laughed at the remark, recounting it later with amusement. Jane Bennet, meanwhile, was admired by all, especially by Mr. Bingley, who danced with her twice and expressed sincere pleasure in her company. Mrs. Bennet observed this with triumph, already imagining a brilliant future. Thus, the ball accomplished much. It revealed character, awakened pride, stirred interest, and planted the first seeds of misunderstanding that would grow in time. Chapter 4. When Jane fell ill after visiting the Bingleys, Elizabeth reflected deeply on the events of the ball. She was pleased by Mr. Bingley's evident affection for her sister, yet wary of the influence his friends might exert. Mr. Darcy's behavior in particular offended her sense of fairness. His pride appeared unshakable, his manner cold and judgmental. Elizabeth valued intelligence and independence, but she could not admire arrogance no matter how well dressed it appeared. Jane, ever gentle, defended Mr. Darcy. She believed that people often judged too quickly and that reserve should not be mistaken for ill will. Elizabeth smiled at her sister's generosity of spirit, but remained unconvinced. The difference between the sisters was clear. Jane was inclined to think well of others, while Elizabeth delighted in discerning character and challenging assumptions. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bennet spoke endlessly of Mr. Bingley's attentions, certain that an engagement could not be far off. Mr. Bennet listened with mild amusement, offering little encouragement, but observing everything with keen awareness. Chapter 5. The neighborhood soon became divided in opinion regarding Mr. Darcy. Some considered him proud and disagreeable. Others acknowledged his elegance and fine connections. Yet few could deny that his manners lacked warmth. Elizabeth, surrounded by her friends, openly criticized his conduct. She spoke freely, never suspecting that her observations might someday be challenged by new understanding. At social gatherings, Darcy observed Elizabeth more closely. Though he disapproved of her family's behavior, he could not ignore her wit, her lively expression, or the intelligence that animated her conversation. His interest, however reluctant, began to grow, while Elizabeth's prejudice remained firmly established. Thus, without their awareness, Pride and Prejudice quietly took their places at the center of the story, shaping perceptions and guiding emotions in ways neither could yet foresee. Chapter 6. As days passed, Mr. Bingley's fondness for Jane Bennet became increasingly apparent. He sought her company whenever possible and spoke of her with admiration that was open and sincere. Jane, in return, received his attentions with calm gratitude and gentle pleasure, though her modest nature kept her feelings carefully restrained. Elizabeth observed this growing attachment with quiet approval. She trusted her sister's judgment and believed that Jane's happiness was well-deserved. Yet, she also remained alert to the influence of Mr. Bingley's companions, particularly his sisters and Mr. Darcy, whose opinions might sway him. Miss Bingley and Mrs. Hurst were polite to Jane, but their friendliness carried an air of reserve. They admired her beauty and sweetness, yet they could not entirely conceal their concern over her family's lack of wealth and social standing. Mr. Darcy, meanwhile, found himself drawn into closer observation of Elizabeth. Though he attempted to resist the attraction, he could not deny the pleasure he found in her conversation and quick intelligence. This internal struggle only heightened his seriousness, which Elizabeth continued to interpret as arrogance. Thus, while affection grew quietly on one side, misunderstanding deepened on the other. Chapter 7. When Jane accepted an invitation to dine at Netherfield, Mrs. Bennet insisted she go on horseback, hoping the weather might worsen and require her daughter to stay the night. The plan succeeded all too well. Caught in a sudden rain, Jane arrived, chilled and unwell. She was persuaded to remain at Netherfield until her health improved. News of her illness quickly reached Longbourn, and Elizabeth resolved to visit her sister at once. Ignoring concerns for appearance or convention, Elizabeth walked the muddy roads to Netherfield. Her arrival, with flushed cheeks and a lively expression, made a striking impression, particularly upon Mr. Darcy, who found her appearance unexpectedly charming. Elizabeth devoted herself to Jane's comfort, remaining by her side and showing deep concern. Her unaffected manners and devotion impressed Mr. Bingley greatly, though Miss Bingley regarded her with less enthusiasm. This visit marked a turning point. Darcy's admiration for Elizabeth grew stronger, while Elizabeth's dislike of his reserved behavior remained unchanged. Chapter 8. Elizabeth stayed at Netherfield for several days while Jane recovered. During this time, she witnessed firsthand the refined manners of the Bingley household and the subtle judgments that accompanied them. Miss Bingley frequently attempted to draw Darcy into conversations that emphasized social rank and accomplishment. Elizabeth, noticing this, amused herself by observing their interactions rather than participating in them. Darcy found himself increasingly attentive to Elizabeth. Her independence, her wit, and her refusal to flatter intrigued him deeply. He admired her mind even as he questioned the propriety of her connections. Elizabeth, for her part, remained unimpressed. She found Darcy's seriousness tiresome and his pride excessive. She spoke freely and laughed easily, never suspecting that her indifference only strengthened his growing admiration. When Jane's health improved, both sisters returned home. Mrs. Bennet was delighted by the progress of Jane's acquaintance with Mr. Bingley, while Elizabeth reflected thoughtfully on the events that had passed, unaware that deeper complications were yet to come. Chapter 9. Elizabeth soon learned that her stay at Netherfield had not been without consequence. Mr. Darcy's attention, though quiet, had grown more pronounced. He listened closely when she spoke and sought opportunities to be near her, though his manner remained reserved. Elizabeth noticed this change, but attributed it to his general habit of observing rather than engaging. She did not imagine that admiration lay behind his attentiveness. To her, Darcy was still proud and overly conscious of his own importance. Meanwhile, Mrs. Bennet rejoiced openly in Jane's improving connection with Mr. Bingley. She spoke confidently of future happiness, and did little to conceal her expectations, to the amusement of her husband and the embarrassment of her daughters. Mr. Bennet, though pleased with Jane's prospects, remained cautious. He understood the fragility of such early attachments and watched events unfold with quiet skepticism. Chapter 10. At a small gathering at Netherfield, Elizabeth found herself engaged in conversation with Mr. Darcy. Their exchange was lively, marked by her playful irony and his earnest seriousness. Darcy attempted to defend his reserved manners, explaining that he found it difficult to converse easily with those he did not know well. Elizabeth countered that conversation, like any skill, required practice, and that one must sometimes make an effort for the sake of others. Their differing views only sharpened the contrast between them. Darcy admired Elizabeth's intelligence and confidence, even as he struggled with her teasing. Elizabeth enjoyed challenging him, unaware of the effect she was having. Miss Bingley watched these interactions with displeasure. She resented Elizabeth's influence and did her best to draw Darcy's attention elsewhere, but with little success. Chapter 11. Mr. Bingley's affection for Jane continued to deepen, though Jane herself remained modest and restrained in expressing her feelings. Elizabeth, knowing her sister well, believed her affection to be sincere, though perhaps less visible than Mrs. Bennet would have wished. Darcy observed Jane closely and, seeing her calm demeanor, questioned the strength of her attachment. This doubt concerned him, for he valued sincerity above all else. Elizabeth, on the other hand, believed that genuine feeling did not always announce itself loudly. She defended Jane warmly, though she remained unaware of Darcy's growing concern and of how his opinions might soon influence events. Thus, beneath the surface of polite visits and social gatherings, emotions quietly intensified. Affection, pride, misunderstanding, and expectation continued to intertwine, setting the stage for conflicts yet to come. Chapter 12. Elizabeth was soon invited to dine at Netherfield once more, and she accepted with mixed feelings. Though she enjoyed the society of Mr. Bingley and the comfort of seeing Jane so well regarded, she could not forget her earlier impressions of Mr. Darcy. During the evening, conversation turned to accomplishments: music, drawing, languages, and refinement. Miss Bingley spoke with confidence of the many talents a truly accomplished woman must possess. Elizabeth listened patiently before remarking with quiet wit that she was astonished any such women existed at all. Darcy observed her closely. Her lively mind and ease of expression only increased his admiration, though he remained silent. Elizabeth, unaware of his feelings, continued to see him as proud and distant. Jane, gentle and composed, attracted Mr. Bingley's attentions throughout the evening. Mrs. Bennet, witnessing this, could hardly contain her satisfaction, though her open enthusiasm caused Elizabeth no small embarrassment. Chapter 13. Mr. Collins soon arrived at Longbourn, a distant cousin of Mr. Bennet and the heir to the family estate. He came with the intention of repairing what he believed to be an injustice, the entailment that would deprive the Bennet daughters of their home. Mr. Collins was a tall, solemn man, excessively formal in manner, and deeply proud of his connection to Lady Catherine de Bourgh, his patroness. He spoke at great length on subjects of little interest. Convinced of his own importance, Mrs. Bennet received him with politeness, hopeful that his presence might prove useful. Elizabeth, however, found his manners tedious and his conversation tiresome. Mr. Bennet listened with dry amusement, finding entertainment in his cousin's self-importance. Despite his awkwardness, Mr. Collins expressed sincere interest in the family and declared his intention to choose one of the Bennet daughters as his wife, believing it his duty to make amends. Chapter 14. Mr. Collins soon turned his attention to Elizabeth, whom he considered suitable for his purposes. He admired her appearance and believed her disposition would complement his own. Elizabeth, however, was far from flattered. She found his manner pompous and his assumptions offensive. Still, she remained civil, determined not to judge him too harshly, at least for the moment. Meanwhile, the social circle continued its quiet shifts. Darcy's feelings for Elizabeth deepened, though his pride and awareness of social distinctions made him uneasy. Elizabeth, confident in her judgments, remained blind to the change in his regard. Thus, new characters entered the story, bringing with them fresh complications. Duty, ambition, and misunderstanding gathered strength, ensuring that the path ahead would be anything but simple. Chapter 15. Mr. Collins wasted no time in declaring his intention. Choosing a moment when Elizabeth was alone, he launched into a formal speech, explaining the advantages of marriage, the expectations of his patroness, Lady Catherine de Bourgh, and the necessity of selecting a wife from among his cousins. Elizabeth listened in growing disbelief. When he finally proposed, it was with little mention of affection, but much discussion of duty, respectability, and convenience. She declined him immediately and firmly. Mr. Collins, however, assumed her refusal was merely a polite formality. He continued speaking as though acceptance were inevitable. Elizabeth, maintaining composure, repeated her refusal with unmistakable clarity. At last, he withdrew, astonished, wounded, and convinced she would soon regret her decision. Chapter 16. Elizabeth soon learned that Mr. Collins had turned his attentions elsewhere. Charlotte Lucas, sensible and practical, accepted his proposal after only a few days' acquaintance. Elizabeth was shocked. She could not understand how her dear friend could sacrifice happiness for security. Charlotte, however, calmly explained her views. Marriage, she believed, was about comfort and stability, not romance. Elizabeth respected Charlotte's honesty, though she could not share her philosophy. The engagement caused much discussion in the neighborhood, and Mrs. Bennet was delighted that at least one daughter might soon be well married, though not her own. Meanwhile, Mr. Darcy's behavior toward Elizabeth continued to change. He listened more, spoke less sharply, and seemed genuinely interested in her opinions, changes Elizabeth barely noticed. Chapter 17. Mr. Bingley's sisters were far less pleased by the growing closeness between their brother and Jane Bennet. Concerned about the family's lack of fortune and connections, they quietly encouraged his departure from Netherfield. Soon after, Bingley left for London, taking Darcy with him. Jane received the news with calm sadness. Though Elizabeth saw through her composure, she suspected Miss Bingley's influence and blamed Darcy for encouraging the separation. Elizabeth's dislike of Darcy deepened. To her, he now appeared not merely proud, but actively unjust. Chapter 18. The Netherfield ball was the grand event of the season. The Bennet family attended with great anticipation, though not without moments of embarrassment caused by Mrs. Bennet's indiscreet remarks. Elizabeth danced with Mr. Collins and found the experience trying. She also danced with Mr. Darcy, whose reserve softened as the evening progressed. Their conversation, though polite, was edged with tension. Elizabeth spoke frankly. Darcy listened intently. Jane, despite her hopes, saw little sign of renewed affection from Bingley, who remained absent. Elizabeth's resentment hardened into certainty. Darcy was to blame. Chapter 19. Soon after the ball, Mr. Collins and Charlotte Lucas were married. Elizabeth, though disappointed in her friend's choice, wished her happiness. Not long afterward, Elizabeth was invited to visit Charlotte at Hunsford, where Mr. Collins now lived near the estate of Lady Catherine de Bourgh. Elizabeth accepted, curious to observe her friend's new life and eager for a change of scene. Chapter 20. At Hunsford, Elizabeth met Lady Catherine de Bourgh, a woman of wealth, rank, and overwhelming self-importance. Lady Catherine questioned Elizabeth relentlessly about her family, education, and future, offering advice whether it was wanted or not. Elizabeth answered with respectful independence, which Lady Catherine found both surprising and unsettling. During this visit, Elizabeth encountered Mr. Darcy once more, now a frequent guest at Rosings. Their interactions were more frequent and more charged than ever before. Chapter 21. The evening passed without incident, though Elizabeth noticed that Mr. Darcy watched her with increasing attention. His manners were more gentle than before, and his attempts at conversation more frequent, though still marked by restraint. Elizabeth, however, remained guarded, her opinion of him shaped by pride and the influence of Mr. Wickham's story was not easily softened. Mrs. Bennet, meanwhile, spoke freely of her hopes that Jane and Mr. Bingley would soon be reunited. Elizabeth privately doubted this, believing the interference of others had been too deliberate to be undone easily. As the evening concluded, Elizabeth could not help but sense that matters of the heart were moving quietly beneath the surface, unspoken, unresolved, and gathering weight. Chapter 22. Mr. Collins returned briefly to Longbourn before his marriage, filled with importance and gratitude toward Lady Catherine, whose guidance he praised endlessly. His manner toward Elizabeth was stiff and formal, as though he still expected admiration for his earlier proposal. Soon after, Charlotte and Mr. Collins were married. Elizabeth wished her friend happiness, though her feelings were mixed with concern. Charlotte appeared content, if not joyful, and spoke sensibly of her plans to manage her household in a way that would allow her husband to remain comfortably occupied and often out of her way. Elizabeth admired Charlotte's practicality, even while regretting the absence of romance. Chapter 23. Elizabeth's visit to Hunsford followed shortly after the marriage. She traveled with Sir William Lucas and his daughter Maria, arriving to find Charlotte settled into her new life with calm efficiency. Mr. Collins proudly displayed his home and spoke at length of Lady Catherine's condescension in visiting them frequently. Elizabeth observed Charlotte closely and was relieved to see that her friend appeared composed and even content. Soon after Elizabeth's arrival, Lady Catherine summoned them to Rosings. Elizabeth found the grandeur impressive, but the conversation exhausting. Lady Catherine dominated the discussion, dispensing advice with an air of absolute authority. During this visit, Elizabeth encountered Mr. Darcy once more. His presence unsettled her. Though she resolved to remain indifferent, she could not ignore the marked change in his manner. He spoke to her with warmth and listened attentively, his interest unmistakable. Elizabeth, though polite, remained cautious, unaware that this meeting marked a turning point in both their lives. Chapter 24. Miss Bingley's dislike of Elizabeth Bennet was steadily increasing. She watched every interaction between Elizabeth and Mr. Darcy with sharp attention, convinced that Elizabeth encouraged his regard. Elizabeth, however, remained unaware of the depth of Darcy's growing admiration. She saw only a reserved man attempting politeness and attributed his attentions to good manners rather than personal interest. During frequent visits to Rosings, Elizabeth observed Darcy's character with increasing curiosity. His manners, though still formal, had softened. He spoke less from pride and more from genuine engagement, especially when Elizabeth expressed opinions that challenged him. Lady Catherine, meanwhile, continued to overwhelm every gathering with her authority, offering unsolicited advice on marriage, education, health, and household management. Elizabeth listened with amused tolerance, never disguising her independence of thought, a quality that both shocked Lady Catherine and fascinated Mr. Darcy. Chapter 25. Charlotte Collins encouraged Elizabeth to observe Darcy more favorably, hinting that his interest was genuine and honorable. Elizabeth dismissed the idea with humor, still convinced that his past behavior and pride made him an unlikely romantic hero. Yet, Darcy's conduct continued to contradict her assumptions. He listened respectfully, sought her company, and appeared genuinely concerned for her comfort. Elizabeth could not deny that her earlier judgments were being quietly challenged. She also observed Colonel Fitzwilliam, Darcy's cousin, who was cheerful, open, and fond of Elizabeth's wit. Their conversations were easy and pleasant, and Elizabeth enjoyed his company greatly. Despite this, Darcy remained the more serious presence, watchful, thoughtful, and increasingly emotionally invested. Chapter 26. One morning, Elizabeth walked with Colonel Fitzwilliam, who spoke candidly of family expectations and financial responsibilities. In doing so, he unintentionally revealed that Darcy had once intervened to prevent an imprudent marriage involving a close friend. Elizabeth immediately believed this referred to Jane and Mr. Bingley. Her resentment toward Darcy reignited fiercely. All her earlier doubts vanished as she convinced herself that Darcy's interference had caused her sister great unhappiness. That same day, Darcy sought Elizabeth out while she was alone. With visible agitation, he declared his love for her, confessing that he had struggled against his feelings but could no longer remain silent. However, His proposal was marred by expressions of pride, revealing his belief that her family connections were beneath him. Elizabeth listened in stunned disbelief. When he finished, she rejected him with firm clarity, condemning both his arrogance and his role in separating Jane from Bingley, as well as his mistreatment of Mr. Wickham. Darcy listened silently, wounded and astonished. Elizabeth's refusal was absolute. Chapter 27. Elizabeth spent the night after Darcy's proposal in a state of deep agitation. Sleep was impossible, her thoughts replaying every word of his confession and her own fierce rejection. By morning, anger had cooled into reflection, but not forgiveness. She remained convinced of Darcy's faults and felt justified in her response. Later that day, Darcy delivered a letter to Elizabeth. His manner was solemn, his expression restrained, and he left before she could speak. Once alone, Elizabeth opened the letter with mixed emotions. In it, Darcy defended himself calmly and clearly. He explained his actions regarding Mr. Bingley and Jane Bennet, insisting that he believed Jane indifferent and acted only to protect his friend from an imprudent attachment. More shocking still was his explanation of Mr. Wickham's history. Darcy revealed Wickham's reckless behavior, debts, and attempted exploitation of his younger sister. Elizabeth read the letter repeatedly. Each reading weakened her certainty. Chapter 28. As Elizabeth reflected on Darcy's words, shame slowly replaced indignation. She realized how easily she had accepted Wickham's story without question, allowing her prejudice to blind her judgment. Darcy's reserved nature had worked against him, while Wickham's charm had won her trust unfairly. Elizabeth acknowledged her own faults with painful clarity. Her pride had been wounded, and she had allowed that injury to distort her understanding. By the time she finished reflecting, her opinion of Darcy had undergone a profound change. His actions, once viewed as cruel, now appeared thoughtful, even honorable. Elizabeth felt humbled. She no longer despised him, but admiration was tempered by regret. Chapter 29. Elizabeth returned to Longbourn deeply changed but outwardly composed. Her family, however, remained unchanged. Mrs. Bennet continued her anxieties over marriages, finances, and social appearances, while Lydia and Kitty were as lively and careless as ever. Elizabeth observed her surroundings with new perspective, realizing how her family's behavior might appear to outsiders and how Darcy might have viewed it. Jane noticed Elizabeth's seriousness, but respected her silence. Elizabeth resolved to keep Darcy's letter private, protecting both his confidence and her sister's feelings. Though Darcy was absent, his influence remained strong in her thoughts. She neither expected nor wished for another encounter, yet felt certain that she would never think of him the same way again. Chapter 30. Elizabeth's thoughts were soon interrupted by new visitors. Colonel Fitzwilliam and Mr. Darcy returned to the neighborhood, and their arrival revived emotions Elizabeth believed she had settled. Colonel Fitzwilliam was as pleasant and open as ever, and Elizabeth found his company easy and agreeable. Through casual conversation, she learned more about Darcy's sense of responsibility, particularly his belief that it was a man's duty to act for the good of those he loved, even when such actions required personal sacrifice. These words struck Elizabeth deeply. She now understood that Darcy's interference in Bingley's courtship of Jane, however painful, had been motivated by loyalty rather than arrogance. When Darcy himself appeared, his behavior was entirely altered. His manners were attentive, respectful, and subdued. Gone was the air of superiority that had once offended her. Elizabeth noticed the change, and though she remained cautious, she could not deny the sincerity of his conduct. Chapter 31. The evening was spent in conversation and quiet observation. Darcy spoke little, but listened carefully, directing his attention particularly toward Elizabeth. His reserve now seemed less like pride and more like thoughtfulness. Elizabeth, in turn, found herself responding with civility and warmth she had never offered him before. Their exchanges, though brief, were marked by mutual understanding. Colonel Fitzwilliam soon departed the neighborhood, leaving Elizabeth with the sense that something important had passed between herself and Darcy, something unresolved. Elizabeth reflected that had Darcy proposed again in this altered manner, her answer might not have been the same. Yet she doubted such an event would ever occur. Darcy soon left as well, and Elizabeth was left to contemplate the strange reversal of her feelings.